The Tech It Up Talk podcast aspires to educate, inform, and inspire educators from teachers to school leaders on tips, tools, and resources to support the integration of technology into classroom instruction.
You ready? Here we go.
You're listening to Tech It Up Talk with Dr. Mac, your host with the most passion for supporting educators from teachers to school leaders with the integration of technology into instruction. Welcome back to another episode of Tech It Up Talk. In today's episode, I have an exciting guest today. We're going to be talking about utilizing a data-driven instructional approach for effective planning strategies and integrating technology within professional learning communities. And our guest today is a dedicated educational professional with over 23 years of experience. Cicely Kelly Ward has a proven track record in leadership roles. Cicely is adept in analyzing performing data, designing and facilitating professional learning for schools and leadership teams, and fostering the professional growth of others. With the background as a manager, a school administrator, and instructional coach, Cicely brings a wealth of experience in driving educational excellence. And it's an absolute pleasure to have here today future Dr. Cicely Kelly Ward. Welcome, Cicely. So exciting to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, the goal of our episode today is to discuss the utilization of data-driven instructional teaching and learning models within planning and professional learning community. So your knowledge and your expertise can definitely help inform our educators and our educational leaders with creating meaningful learning environments that can make an impact on student performance. So let's just dive into my first question, which is really about understanding data-driven instruction. And so for those who may not fully understand or maybe new to the concept, what does data-driven instruction mean, and how does it play a crucial role in improving teaching and learning?
Well, in layman's terms, I think I would say that it's just the process of using data to inform and guide your instructional practices. It involves making sure that you collect, analyze, and interpret relevant data to make informed decisions about your curriculum, your instructional strategies, and most importantly, individual student needs. I would say it's a little bit more complex than that. It sounds simple. I know we've all heard the saying, it will all come out in the wash. And that's really, how I view data-driven instruction. It involves a systems approach for it to be highly effective. So if you put good, consistent systems and people in place, eventually you will reach the desired outcomes. The data integrated teaching and learning model that I created is a visual that highlights several independent cycles working together to create one holistic system.
Awesome. Okay, so now let's talk about kind of the role of technology. And so how can technology be effectively integrated into data-driven instruction to enhance planning and teaching strategies?
So technology plays a significant role in enhancing data-driven instruction by providing tools and resources that will really just help streamline the collection, analysis, and the utilization of your data. I would say having access to a data management system or some learning management system, such as Eduphoria or Canvas, can allow teachers and leaders to collect and organize the data from whatever assessments or just learning that they're trying to capture. And those systems typically have reports that are already embedded so that performance and progress can be analyzed. I would also say the use of digital assessment tools to create and administer formative and summative assessments, because those tools will often provide instant feedback, which will allow the teachers to quickly identify areas of strengths as well as areas of concern among their students.
So let's kind of transition that. So now we're talking, I heard you talk about reports and leveraging these assessment platforms. So when we're planning with data, how do teachers and leaders use the data to inform lesson planning and instructional strategies? And can you provide some examples of how technology can facilitate this process?
Yeah, so we mainly use the data to inform lesson planning and instructional strategies again, by gathering and analyzing. Really, it's three things that I would say that we're looking at as it relates to the students. I would say it's their performance, it's their level of engagement, and their understanding. And so, leveraging technology to find patterns in historical data can help educators visualize those trends over time. Also, tracking the progress of students can provide real time data on who may need additional support or interventions and the effectiveness of those interventions. Technology implementation can lead to more targeted and effective teaching practices. And so, one example that really comes to mind is the high school that you and I supported back in the 2018-19 school year. Um,
Whoop, whoop.
I I remember we saw a lot of gains across the board, and the accountability ratings show it. So overall, that school went from a D, they had a scale score of a 60, which was very close to being an F, to a C, a 77 scale score. So when you talk about a huge gain, and we weren't far from really being a B rating. And so I think what changed the trajectory was, of course, the new leadership that was appointed mid year, but also it was the intentional planning that we did around the data and curriculum. And I remember supporting teachers by setting up a teach tracker in every classroom and subject. Everyone was tracking student data, from the dance teacher to the Spanish teacher. And so I think it's just really, important to point out that when you are consistent again in your processes, and you're monitoring those processes, then you will in the end see the type of gain and outcomes that you really desire. I mean, and I remember that same year, the middle school that I supported, just to highlight, from the previous school year, they went from three distinctions to five, at the end of the 2019 school year. And so a lot of that I would attribute to, the work and the planning that we did with the data.
Right. I like that you said it wasn't just about just your core content areas, because a lot of times when we're looking at data, a lot of times our leadership and our instructional leaders are focused in core areas. So I like that you included the dance teacher. Like, everyone's a part of this process. It's a part of the culture of building across the campus. And yes, and that was, some years ago, but that process still is really important. And so, and talking about the process and then where these opportunities happen, let's move to professional learning communities. And so they're probably called different things depending on who's listening, what your district or school may refer to it as. I've heard curriculum-based professional learning. I've heard professional learning communities. So it's that place really where we get together and leverage time as the instructors and the leaders to really plan. And so if you can really tell us, like, what role do professional learning communities play in supporting data-driven instruction, and how can technology enhance the collaboration within PLCs?
So PLCs foster collaboration. And, you mentioned earlier the word culture. I think it's the PLCs that help promote a culture of continuous improvement. And they also facilitate the sharing of best practices. So, for those reasons, I believe PLCs are sacred and will always be part of any effective DDI process. Technology can enhance collaboration within the PLCs through having things such as cloud based document sharing for curriculum alignment and lesson planning, perhaps even having an online repository or shared drive, to provide a centralized space so that editing and continuous updates can go on. And so I stated earlier that, this is an ongoing process. And so, because you have to take an iterative approach to the work, you want to just make sure that teachers and leaders have a place to access the resources. Another tool that I would say is very helpful is video. I think videos can really enhance PLC collaboration. And anytime you get an opportunity to observe your peer and provide feedback, that's really supporting teachers and leaders in refining their craft.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to like addressing challenges. So with implementing data driven instruction and integrating technology, of course, it comes with challenges. So, what are some common hurdles and how can our teachers and our leaders overcome them?
Well, I think one common challenge is resistance to change. Um, Even in my experience, I think people people just resist change, and a lot of it has to do with them just not being used or having to get used to some adopting some new practice, especially when you're used to the old habits that you have. I would also say creating a supportive environment that encourages experimentation, making sure that there's training and coaching that can help address people being resistant to change. Another, I think, challenge is that some schools or districts have limited access to tech devices, and that can really impede DDI implementation in some schools and district communities. There may be disparities also in accessing digital resources. And so I think having an opportunity to create some partnerships and finding ways to provide equitable access to devices and internet connectivity can help bridge the digital divide.
Oh, for sure. And I could think of another challenge. It's not necessarily technology. It could just be planning and just scheduling the time for those opportunities to even happen. You would think that it's a simple task, but we know we're faced with a lot of these curriculums being demanding of time and how much time is spent here. And then sometimes we lose time in other areas of the day. And our teachers aren't afforded those opportunities to get together as often or for the extended amount of times they need to be really good at building that culture with professional learning communities to help with supporting data-driven instruction.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, planning takes time, and it's a skill, to be honest.
Now, there was one thing you shared earlier on that I wanted to go back to. I didn't want to. I want to come back to the model, and I want to give you some time to kind of explain like what the model is and how does it work and how it be applied, or the framework for our teachers or instructional leaders.
So when you look at the visual, the model that I created, what you're going to see um, are really just different cycles that were put together to create this holistic system. And so within um, you have the DDI process and cycle, right? Data driven instruction cycle. There are certain things that are expected to take place within that cycle. And then you have the PLC cycle. And so there are certain things that are expected to take place within that particular cycle. And then finally, you have the instructional planning cycle. And so when you bring all three of these independent cycles together, to me, that is what really creates an effective data driven instruction process. And I think so many times people just, we forget that it takes, leaning on and building and trying to sustain multiple pieces of the work so that in the end you end up, like I said earlier, with the desired outcome. And so if you can keep your PLCs, your instructional planning, and then your data driven instructional process all at the forefront and bring all of these pieces together, then I'm telling you, you are going to see results like you've never seen them before.
Now, if you guys want to learn more about the model, of course, we have a book out called Get Your Tech Together, which is also our next segment of this podcast. And so Cicely shares more about the data integrated teaching and learning model, where she talks about those cycles there. So, of course, check it out. It's available on Amazon. You can get it there, too. But let's go ahead and talk about Get Your Tech Together. And so in this segment of the show, this is where I ask guests who are joining me to kind of share some must-have tools that teachers, leaders, and instructional coaches can have in their toolbox to support data-driven instruction.
Well, as a former teacher, I found very early on in my career that anytime I could make learning fun for kids, that they were more engaged, they were more excited about the work. And so, there are so many learning apps that are available. And anytime you can include gamification as a part of the learning to make it engaging and interactive, that's going to have a great impact on student participation and performance. And so I would always highly encourage, as you're working on your lesson plans, to think about some different learning apps such as Kahoot. I know that's a really popular one. And I mean, there are tons out there now. And so I would just say explore, different learning apps and find ways to gamify your lessons as you're thinking about what students need to master. I would even also say that anytime you can automate your data collection, that is going to be very helpful because it's going to reduce any manual, workload, and it'll help ensure consistency in how you gather your data. And so there are plenty of free tools out there, such as Google Sheets, that can help you do that. And it will also help you with the visualization piece of your data as well. So I think that's also important. And then finally, I would even encourage or suggest any type of electronic portfolios that can help students be able to showcase their work and see their progress over time, because then that's just going to help provide a comprehensive view of their learning journey. And it will help you as the teacher, again, be able to better individualize based on student needs.
Awesome. Awesome. So as we wrap up and go into our final thoughts now, before we wrap up, if you can just kind of share with our listeners your top 3 tips that they can take away about data-driven instruction.
So my top 3 tips, that's hard. But I would say first and foremost, you have to build a collaborative culture within those PLCs, so that you can encourage data sharing, you can encourage open communication, and encourage collective decision making, because that's what collaboration is all about. I would say the second thing would be to recognize the value of both having quantitative and qualitative data as you inform your instructional decisions. Making sure that you have a balance between the two is really just going to offer you a holistic approach to the DDI process. Having the numbers are great, but don't forget about that observation and feedback piece. You want to make sure that you're able to see the processes and see the systems in action, because that too is going to help inform what your next step should be. And then I would say, lastly, just follow your roadmap and trust the process. You know, understand that data driven instruction is an ongoing process. And there will be continuous feedback, analysis, and adjustment. And I think as long as you embrace a growth mindset, you will be able to see your challenges as opportunities for improvement. Um, Within all of that, regularly revisit your goals so that you can assess whether what you guys are doing is making a difference. And then trusting the process just really involves being adaptable and responsive to the evolving needs of the students and the teachers.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cicely. It was a pleasure having you on today. Can you please share how listeners can connect with you and become a part of your network?
Yes, sure. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm on X, and I'm on Instagram at the handle that you see here at Cicely K. Ward.
All right. And that's a wrap up with another enlightening episode of Tech It Up Talk. A big thank you to our incredible guest, Cicely Kelly Ward, for sharing her invaluable insights on data-driven instruction. We hope you, our fantastic listeners, have gained fresh perspectives and actionable ideas to enhance your instructional practices. Before we go, remember to connect with us and stay updated on all things Tech It Up Talk. Follow us on your favorite social media platforms at Tech It Up Talk. Whether it's X, Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn, we want to hear from you. Share your thoughts, ideas, and suggestions for future episodes. Also, be sure to get a copy of our book, Get Your Tech Together, available on Amazon.